Welcome to Mr. Darkhowl, where chilling tales and haunting mysteries await. Like this video, subscribe for more weekly horrors, and now, let the story begin. There's a house in the hills where the walls breathe and the shadows whisper. Don't look back if you hear your name. Greystone Manor stood atop Raven's Peak, like a sentinel of despair, its jagged spires clawing at the sky. Every town has its legends, but this one was different. There was no folklore, no embellishments, just a singular, chilling truth. Everyone who entered the house either vanished or left with stories they refused to tell. For Lucy Harper, an ambitious journalist chasing her first breakout story, the manor was an irresistible siren. Freshly assigned to cover the history of the most haunted houses in the world, Lucy knew Greystone was the crown jewel. "Think twice about this," warned Ben, her partner and cameraman. His voice faltered as they parked at the rusted gates of the estate, their headlights slicing through a thick, unnatural fog. "Since when did you become superstitious?" Lucy teased, stepping out into the biting cold. "I'm not. But this place, it's wrong," Ben muttered, his eyes scanning the eerie silhouette of the house. The wind carried with it the faint sound of whispers, as though the trees themselves were gossiping. Lucy ignored it, shouldering her bag of equipment. Greystone Manor beckoned her like an old lover, mysterious and dangerous. The grand double doors creaked open on their own, revealing a yawning darkness within. Dust motes swirled in the beam of their flashlights as Lucy and Ben stepped inside. The air was thick with mildew and something else, something acrid, like decay. "Old houses have rats," Lucy said, more to herself than to Ben. The entryway was a masterpiece of Gothic architecture. Ornate chandeliers hung precariously from the ceiling, their crystals dull with grime. Paintings lined the walls, portraits of stern, pale-faced ancestors who seemed to follow them with their eyes. "Let's get some footage of this," Lucy said, setting up her camera. As Ben adjusted the tripod, he froze. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" "That?" He trailed off, pointing toward the staircase. Lucy followed his gaze and felt her stomach twist. A faint shadow moved across the upper landing, slipping between the cracked doors of a bedroom. It wasn't the shadow itself that unnerved her, but the sound that accompanied it, a soft, guttural whisper that slithered into her ears like a secret she wasn't meant to hear. "We're not alone," Ben whispered, his voice trembling. "Let's find out who or what is up there," Lucy replied, masking her own fear with determination. The stairs groaned under their weight as they ascended, each creak like a warning. The whispers grew louder, more distinct. They weren't random noises, but voices, overlapping and chaotic, speaking in a language neither of them understood. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched like an endless void. Doors lined both sides, each one slightly ajar, as though inviting them in. This doesn't feel right," Ben said, backing toward the staircase. "Stay close," Lucy urged, stepping toward the nearest door. Inside was a child's bedroom frozen in time. A rocking horse sat in one corner, its chipped paint revealing layers of history. The bed was neatly made, the sheets eerily pristine. On the wall, a hand-drawn picture hung crooked. Lucy tilted her head to examine it. A crude drawing of a family. The mother and father stood smiling, while the child in the middle held their hands. But behind them loomed a tall, shadowy figure with glowing red eyes. "Lucy." Ben's voice wavered. She turned to see him staring at the rocking horse, which had begun to sway gently on its own. "Let's go," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But before they could leave, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Panic surged through Lucy as she yanked at the door handle. It wouldn't budge. The whispers were no longer faint. They were all around them now, filling the room like a storm. The air grew colder, and the shadows on the walls began to shift, taking on distorted humanoid forms. "Help us," one of the voices moaned, clear and desperate. Lucy turned to see a face in the mirror, a woman's face, gaunt and pale, her eyes hollow and pleading. "Get us out of here," Ben shouted, slamming his shoulder against the door. The mirror cracked and the woman's face disappeared. The door finally gave way, and they stumbled back into the hallway, gasping for breath. "We need to leave," Ben said, his voice shaking. "No," Lucy insisted. "We came here for a story, and we're not leaving without it." Ben stared at her in disbelief. "Are you out of your mind? This place—" "Look," Lucy interrupted, pointing to the far end of the hallway. A door was opening, slowly, as if beckoning them. Against Ben's protests, Lucy approached the door, flashlight in hand. The room beyond was a library, its shelves crammed with ancient, leather-bound tomes. At the center of the room stood a desk, and on it, a single book lay open, its pages glowing faintly. Lucy stepped closer, drawn to the book as though it were calling her. "Don't," Ben warned, but his voice seemed distant, drowned out by the hum of the room. The book's pages were filled with symbols that pulsed like a heartbeat. As Lucy touched the page, a surge of cold shot through her body and her vision blurred. Suddenly, she was no longer in the library. She was standing in a vast shadowy void, surrounded by figures shrouded in darkness. Their faces were featureless, their voices a cacophony of anguish. "You shouldn't have come," one of them hissed, its voice like nails on glass. "What do you want?" Lucy demanded, her voice trembling. "You?" Lucy jolted back to reality, gasping for air. She was still in the library, but something had changed. The room felt alive, its walls pulsing like flesh. "What happened?" Ben asked, grabbing her shoulders. They're trapped here," Lucy whispered, tears streaming down her face. "The house, it feeds on them, on us." Before Ben could respond, the shadows in the room coalesced into a towering figure with burning red eyes, the same figure from the child's drawing. "Run!" Lucy screamed, dragging Ben toward the door. The house was no longer just a structure. It was a living, breathing entity. The walls warped and twisted, and the floor buckled beneath their feet. They sprinted down the staircase, but the front door had vanished, replaced by a solid wall. "We're not getting out," Ben said, his voice hollow. "There has to be a way," Lucy insisted, frantically searching for an escape. The whispers grew deafening, the shadowy figure closing in. In a moment of clarity, Lucy remembered the book, the library. "It's the key." "No way," Ben said. "We barely got out of there alive." "It's the only chance we have," Lucy said, determination replacing her fear. They raced back to the library, the house fighting them every step of the way. When they reached the desk, the book was glowing brighter than before. Lucy opened it, her fingers trembling. "There's a ritual, a way to banish the entity, but it requires a sacrifice." Ben's face went pale. "What kind of sacrifice?" Before Lucy could answer, the shadow figure lunged at them. Ben pushed her aside, taking the full force of the attack. "Ben?" Lucy screamed as he was dragged into the darkness. With no time to grieve, she recited the words from the book, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. The room shook violently, and the shadow figure let out an ear-piercing scream before disintegrating into nothingness. Dawn, clutching the book to her chest. The house was silent now, its whispers gone, but the price had been steep. As she stood at the gates, she turned back one last time. In the window of the child's bedroom, she saw Ben's face, watching her with a faint, sorrowful smile. The house had claimed him, but it had spared her. For now. The morning light struggled to break through the thick fog that clung to the ground like a blanket of sorrow. Lucy stood frozen at the gates of Greystone Manor, the weight of what she had done and lost pressing down on her chest. The book in her hands felt like a heavy stone, its edges sharp against her palm. The wind stirred, sending a shiver down her spine. She glanced once more at the manor, and for a fleeting moment heard Ben's voice, faint but urgent, whispering in her mind, "You have to leave, before it comes for you too." But she didn't. She couldn't. Not yet. She took a step back toward the road, but her gaze was still locked on the window where Ben's face had appeared. His sad, distant expression remained etched in her mind. His eyes, once full of life, now reflected only the grim, eternal prison that had become Greystone Manor. With one final glance over her shoulder, Lucy turned away, her footsteps heavy on the damp earth. She didn't dare to look back again. The house had won in a way. But she had survived. For now. The journey back to the city felt endless. The car seemed to crawl along the winding roads as though reluctant to carry her away from the nightmare she had just lived. But the sense of dread remained, gnawing at her, whispering from the shadows, reminding her that Greystone Manor never truly let go. It had taken Ben, and in doing so, it had marked her. There was no escaping it. And somewhere, in the deepest recesses of her mind, Lucy Harper knew the truth. The whispers were still there, just beneath the surface, waiting. They always were.